Hello, and welcome to my season 2 of the Garden in the Desert podcast. My name is Jalen. To those of you all who are new, to those of you all who already know me, what's up? I hope y'all been having a good 2020 so far. I want to thank y'all personally for all of the positive feedback that you guys gave me about season 1. You guys had so much nice, kind things to say and really encouraged me with keeping this process moving forward. But the one piece of advice that every single person who listened to the podcast told me was that you all thought I needed a visual aspect. So, estoy aquí. Visual, baby. We on YouTube in 2020. So this is the very first episode for the YouTube version of the podcast. And so I hope you guys are happy that I not only took your advice, but also happy to connect with me on this other platform. And of course, por cierto, por claro, un bienvenidos muy especial para mi gente que habla en español. Muchísimas gracias para regresar y muchas gracias para tu apoyo y tus palabras muy sinceras. Les agradezco mucho. Y este episodio será muy especial para mí porque vamos a decirte consejos y información sobre la manera que tú puedes aprender una lengua nueva, una lengua que tú no sabías antes. Sí, porque soy americana y yo digo inglés, español más o menos, y un poco de francés también. Y yo sé cómo difícil es aprender una lengua nueva, cualquier cosa nueva. Y vengo aquí para ayudarte y darte fuerza y esperanza y mucha información sobre el tema de aprendiendo lenguas diferentes. In this episode, I'm also going to discuss what Americans are doing wrong because we know Americans, we literally suck, you guys, and we don't speak other languages. But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about why that is. I want to talk about the concept of the lingua franca. And then I also want to talk about how to get started on your new language. I know that there's lots of apps, there's tutors, there's lots of different recommended ways that you can get started. And I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about that. You guys have asked me so many questions. So I'm going to definitely break down some of the tips and tricks that I use to get to the level of fluency where I am, where I definitely don't consider myself fluent, but I can have a conversation, you know what I mean? And then lastly, I'll talk about how you can reach fluency fast because once you start speaking in your language, you want to improve constantly, and I have a couple tips and tricks for that. So once again, muchísimas gracias. Estoy muy feliz para estar aquí y presentar mis ideas y mis piensas en este tema. Y dame un momentico. Yo digo momentico ahora porque yo veí una serie, se llama Celia, es de la vida de Celia Cruz, y en Cuba, y en esta serie ellos digan ico, momentico, pobretico, es muy graciosa a mí. Entonces, vamos a ver, dale, we're going to learn how to learn another language. Okay, so let's do this thing. I'm psycho, by the way. If you can't already tell, you'll figure it out pretty soon. I also don't know if I should be looking over here or over here or over here at my notes because tengo mis notas. Las tengo porque las necesito mucho, mis notas. So, discúlpame, por favor. But, like I said, I promise you guys, first thing, what are Americans doing wrong? Well, we're doing a lot of things wrong, but we're going to focus only on our failed attempts. Look at this. I think I like that better. Shit. I'm not gonna edit this out. Actually, I'm gonna leave this because this is me. You guys need to know who the real me is. But what are Americans doing wrong? Well, you guys, we're doing a lot of things wrong. The U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey of 2017 found that 1 in 5 Americans speak another language. That's about 20% of the population. Of that 20%, 75% of those other language speakers are immigrants, which means that they're bringing their language and their customs or whatnot with them to America, and then they're using their language. I listened to a Freakonomics radio podcast before I was preparing for this one, and they made the claim that less than 1% of Americans can fluently speak a language that they learned in school. I know, it's not a really good average. This is self-reported, of course. So this is Americans self-reporting themselves proficient in a language they learned in the classroom. Americans and the Brits, we are notorious, you guys, for only speaking one language. We are a monolingual culture. We practice what's called English language exceptionalism, which is basically the idea that English is the dominant language of the world, aka the lingua franca. Now, you know what that term means. It's a Latin term. It basically means the default language of the world. So we don't need to learn other languages, right? Because other people just gonna like talk to us in English. They should learn English, right? They should learn English because English is the language, right? Well, what happens when that's not the case anymore? Can we guarantee that English will be the lingua franca of the world? I don't know. The foreign language funding debate is super hotly debated. So whenever policymakers, lawmakers, whoever, they want to talk about, cutting funding and government spending, something that always gets cut is languages and the arts, foreign language learning. There's a thing called the Language Advocacy Day. It's basically this day on Capitol Hill where like lobbyists and teachers and policymakers come together to advocate for increased investment in language learning. Last year's Language Advocacy Day found that only 7% of students currently enrolled in university are studying another language. Enrollment in foreign language classes have dropped consistently. It's been a steady decline pretty much since the 90s. Every year, we're losing funding for foreign language programs. Less and less students are not only taking up a foreign language, but actually maintaining it and keeping it up, like actually working on it constantly. And so what a lot of experts fear is this concept of the global war for talent. It's the idea that as some of these other countries that are now beginning to foster a strong middle class, so China, Brazil, India, as those middle class children grow up and enter the workforce, they're ultimately going to be the competition for Americans and Europeans and the British, because they're now going to be competing for the same jobs as the job market continues to globalize, right? And so the idea is that these they're not immigrants because they like live in other countries, sorry, but like these people in these new middle class countries, they're going to basically be more marketable as job seekers and as employees because they already speak two languages. They speak their native, maybe it's Mandarin or Hindi or Bengali or Portuguese or Spanish. And then on top of that, they're speaking English. And then many of them speak a whole other language. So we're just at a huge disadvantage when it comes to competing in the global talent marketplace if Americans don't take learning other languages more seriously. And why don't we take other languages more seriously? Like, we know that learning other languages has a ton of benefits, health benefits, mental benefits, community benefits, makes you more empathetic to other people. So why are we not doing it? Well, the main reason that we don't prioritize language learning in my country, in the US, is because we don't believe that it's something that we can do. We don't believe that we can actually be fluent in a language. And so students are often discouraged from studying and taking up foreign languages seriously in school because they don't believe that they'll ever be fluent, for one. And they're afraid that if they take this class and they're not fluent and they don't get an A or they don't get a B or whatever, if they get a C or a D, then that can tank an otherwise stellar GPA. And like, let's be honest, we all remember those days. Like, nobody wanted to have like a bad GPA. And there's been increased focus on specialization, like pre-law and engineering programs, especially at the high school and the middle school level. So it's pushing language learning to the wayside because people feel like they need to focus on these other topics that are considered more hardcore topics or have a better return on investment. And so people just like, we're not doing it. immigrant children who speak another language at home, and this is what is so infuriating to me, is that on the one hand, we tell Americans not to learn another language, like don't go another language, just speak English. And then the immigrants who come here who have the advantage of speaking another language in the home, they're put into English learning programs that stifle their native language and ultimately kind of deter them from wanting to speak in their native language. By the third generation in this country, immigrants have lost their mother tongue. So it's literally like your grandma, your mom, and then you don't speak it at all. And that puts immigrants at a huge disadvantage even in this country, because now they've forsaken a language that could actually have benefits to them professionally, from a community standpoint, and they're forsaking that to learn English. At the same time, we're telling our kids not to bother learning anything but English. It's very, what's the word? I'm thinking of the word, like I can't, this is what happens when you start to learn other languages. Sometimes you can't even remember a word in your main language. I don't know. It's just bad. Like it's bad and it's shitty, and we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't be telling people to get rid of their native language, and we should be encouraging people to want to learn other languages. It shouldn't be about the GPA. It should be about the actual knowledge, right? Like grades aren't as important as like an actual solid GPA are. But the second reason why we suck at learning languages, besides our own belief that we can't accomplish it, is we fail to focus on the long-term benefits of language learning. So the average student takes language courses for about 2 to 3 years. That's less than 600 hours of classroom instruction, and it's just simply not enough. I took Spanish for 4 years in high school, and like it still wasn't enough. It's just not enough. Language learning is a long, tedious process. You have to work to first learn your language, then you also have to work constantly to retain and improve your language. We falsely perpetuate this idea that only babies and young children can achieve fluency in a language. That's not true. Yes, it is generally accepted that to have a native accent, to speak a language as if you are native, you do have to learn it by, I think they say 6 or 7, to be able to have a native accent. However, you don't need to have a native accent to speak the language. I know when you guys heard me speaking just a little while ago, you could tell I sound American. But guess what? I can talk. Older people can actually do better than kids at learning languages because older students are more focused. Older students can set goals a lot easier. Older students are more consistent. They're just more serious students. So this idea that we have to be young to learn a language, I mean, I'm all here for the pre-K and the early childhood immersion programs that have become extremely popular. I think they're great if you can put your child into one of those, as soon as possible. But just because you can't put your kid into one of those fancy private schools, or just because, hell, you might be old as dirt. You might be 75 years old. Not saying when 75 is old as dirt. It's all age is all a mental thing for sure. But you could be literally old as dirt and like still learn another language. It's totally possible, you guys. Language learning also has so many cognitive benefits. Like the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages have emphasized that it improves or enhances problem-solving skills, it improves verbal and spatial abilities, it improves memory function, both short-term and long-term. And if you smoke cannabis, your short-term memory needs some help, okay? You need some help. I need some help. I can't remember stuff that happened 5 seconds ago. I can barely remember what the hell I was just saying to you guys on this podcast 5 seconds ago. So learning another language can help to improve your memory skills, and we need it because it makes you a more flexible, a more creative thinker. It improves your attitude towards other cultures and increases your empathy and open-mindedness, which, let's be honest, Americans, we need it. We don't get exposed to lots of other cultures. Like, we're not Europe, we're not Brussels, we're not like a country where we have a lot of languages that are constantly being spoken around us. So we need to make an effort to explore. I'm not saying that it's not great to be American. I'm not saying it's not great to speak English. I'm just saying, like, open your mind and learn more. Also, language learning can delay the onset of Alzheimer's and dementia. And if you're anything like me and the ladies in my family, they are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I'm going to be demented as hell by the time I'm like Honestly, I don't even know. I don't know when. But what I do know is that I plan on holding it off for as long as possible. And so if you have a history of Alzheimer's, dementia, just general cuckoo craziness in the old people in your family, you're going to want to keep your brain sharp. So keep your brain sharp by learning another language. Languages are an incredible gift. Speaking to people who you might not have been able to speak to previously is an incredible gift. Now I'm going to discuss how you can actually make this happen. I know that you guys want to speak. I know that you're passionate about being an American that is different from the way the world perceives Americans. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of exactly how I got started. Okay, so I've gabbed all about what Americans are doing wrong. Let's talk now about how I got started and how you guys can get started too. Oh my God, hair in my face. Okay, so I'm working on both my second and my third languages concurrently. My third language is French, and I did not grow up speaking a second language in the home. So everything I'm going to share with you guys is just from what I've learned personally and what I've also learned from the polyglots who I have in my life. I'm very fortunate to have quite a few polyglots in my social circle, and I've learned a lot from watching and just essentially copying them. So the number one and the first and the most, just I can't even stress how important this is. You've got to stop being afraid. It is natural to feel weird when you are speaking in a language that's not your mother tongue. I'm going to take it back to the lingua franca, right? So Americans, we have this fear of sounding stupid or looking stupid if we can't speak perfectly. And that's just something that we as a society need to get over. Like I mentioned before, I took Spanish for 4 years in high school. I went to an incredible school. I went to a private all-girls Catholic school. I had an incredible curriculum. I had incredible teachers, and I achieved a high level of language, Spanish language reading proficiency in school, taking Spanish 1, 2, 3, and 4, obviously in that order. And to this day, I can still read Spanish really, really well, even though it's definitely something that I pushed aside in favor of some other methods that I've been using more recently that I'll go into in a moment. But reading in Spanish is one of my big priorities for 2020, is to really prioritize taking the time to make sure I'm reading, because reading is low-key how you learn how to talk, but we'll talk about that in a second. After high school, though, after getting out of Spanish 4, I stopped making an effort to speak in real life because I wasn't in class anymore. I didn't have that safety net of my teachers and my classmates, people I could talk to without fear, sin miedo. And so when people would approach me in Spanish, I would respond in English because I wasn't confident in my Spanish speaking skills. And I was honestly just kind of embarrassed. I didn't want to sound stupid. I didn't want to look weird. It wasn't until I moved to Las Vegas, and I was working on the Strip, and I was coming into contact with people from all over the Latin American world, like Honduras, Argentina, Nicaragua. These tourists, these people didn't spoke basically no English. So me responding to them in English wasn't doing anything for anybody, and that forced me to speak. I work in a sales job. I was trying to make sales. So people were trying to buy, I was trying to sell. I'm like, we're going to figure this out. And that was such a good experience for me because it got me over that shame of being afraid to speak in my second language. And Americans in general, we have this horrible, 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 disgusting custom here in this country of shaming people who don't speak a certain way. So whether that's like English isn't their first language, maybe they have an accent, maybe they have a slight speech impediment, whatever the case may be, it's like we treat people like they are garbage if they can't express themselves in a way that we have designated is the way that you're supposed to speak. I even remember reading something a few days ago. Well, by the time you guys are watching this or reading this, it'll probably been about some weeks. So a couple weeks, months ago, I was reading something about Sarah Saunders talking about Joe Biden because he stuttered during a campaign speech or something. And it's just like, are you serious? You know how many speeches that man probably has to give a day? You know how old he is? I'm impressed with the simple fact that he can get up and talk at his age, let alone talk all day long to judgmental people like you. It's just ridiculous. And we're literally the only people who behave this way. When I speak in Spanish to native Spanish speakers, they're so nice to me. They are like, oh my gosh, obviously it's be like, oh, Dios, like you speak so well. They encourage me. They feel orgulloso, pride. Like to hear somebody who doesn't need to speak their language making an effort to do that. When they come to America or when they go to English speaking countries and they speak, we make them feel stupid. We ridicule them. We like speak English. And it's like, you guys, we really have to stop doing this. We have to stop creating this shame and this pressure around speaking perfect English. No tengo ninguna vergüenza ahora cuando yo hablo, porque nunca seré perfecta. Nunca. Perfection is not your goal, okay? It's not possible to speak a language perfectly. Your ultimate goal needs to be proficiency over perfection. Think about it. In English, you are still learning new words constantly. There are some people who I speak to in English who are native born Americans whose first language is English, and they don't understand me. They don't understand my vocabulary. Maybe they don't understand my slang when I start using my DMV, PG girl slang. Like, it's just the way it is. We're constantly learning. Language is constantly evolving. And so you have to treat your second language the same way. You still have to look words up, right? If I walked into a law firm and pulled out a file and started reading it, I would probably have to look some stuff up because I wouldn't understand some of the legal jargon that lawyers use. And that's okay. But it doesn't mean I don't speak good English. I do. I speak great English. I just don't know every single freaking word in the dictionary, and nobody does. It's literally just not possible. Foreign language classes, I feel like overall need like a huge overhaul, because basically when we take classes in school, you lose points for like spelling, grammatical errors, accent. I remember in Spanish class, I used to get so annoyed because I wouldn't put the freaking accent over the right like letter. And literally, you guys, it does not matter. We need to be focusing on what is your working level of proficiency in the language. You don't have to read perfectly. You don't have to write perfectly. You don't have to speak perfectly, but you have to be confident and comfortable speaking. That matters so much more. When I look at my friends who are polyglots, like they don't speak perfect. Like if you meet people who say, oh, I speak 8 languages, I speak 12 languages, like most times, 9 times out of 10, they don't speak all of those languages on an advanced or native level. They may speak their mother tongue on a native level. They probably speak 1 or 2 other languages at a really high advanced level. And then the rest of their languages, they might speak an intermediate level or just a conversational level. But their ability to have a conversation is so like big, so huge, because like just being able to have a basic conversation can save you so much time and so much headache when you encounter people who just don't speak the language that you do. The next thing, besides getting over your fears of speaking to strangers, because you will need to go and speak to some strangers. I'm sorry. It's the only way you're going to learn. You can't talk to yourself. You can't talk to your pets. You got to talk to real people. So once you've gotten over your fear, like I'm not afraid, I'm going to go out and I'm going to speak, you need to figure out how you're going to start. And so a lot of you guys asked my opinion on language learning apps. I know there's a ton out there like Babbel, Duolingo, Rosetta Stone. And my issue with these apps isn't that they don't work. I believe they do work. I actually used Rosetta Stone as my basic intro to French. And while I definitely don't consider myself to be a fluent French speaker, I can certainly recognize a lot of popular phrases, and I can communicate some pretty basic phrases as well. Things like, je suis américain, je ne parle pas le français, je parle juste un petit peu le français, je suis désolé, je suis américain, quelle heure est-il? J'ai besoin de charger mon iPhone, s'il vous plaît. Bonjour, bonsoir, merci, je vous en prie, je t'en prie, comment t'appelles-tu? Où est la toilette? All of these are like really useful things to be able to say to people if you ever find yourself in a time when you need to speak French. So I'm not going to dismiss the Duolingos and all these other apps as not working. My issue with it is that they claim to make you fluent fast. It's a lie. You cannot be fluent in a language fast, period. I know I've already said that, but I'm going to keep saying it so you guys understand. There's no such thing as 6-month fluency, overnight fluency, 5 minutes a day fluency. It's just not going to happen. Language learning is an investment, and you have to be willing to make that investment. Because I made the investment in completing levels 1 through 5 of French Rosetta Stone, I now feel very confident in my ability to recognize basic French grammar, phrases, expressions, and accents that I feel like I could easily take a class or buy a grammar book, which is actually, if you look at my Amazon cart right now, that's literally all you're going to see is like I'm picking between different French grammar books. And I feel like with studying grammar and maybe working with a tutor or taking a class, I can improve so much. So these language apps or these softwares will give you the basic standing ground that you need to be able to start working in your language. But I just don't like the thing that they say where it's like, in just 5 minutes a day. The reason why I don't want you guys to do just 5 minutes a day is because I don't think that 5 minutes a day is a significant amount of time enough for you to put into your schedule. Like, nobody schedules something that they do 5 minutes a day. I feel like it's very easy to not do it because it's just 5 minutes. It's not going to be something that you're really prioritizing. For me, I block out at least an hour a day, or I would recommend for you guys at least an hour a day, Monday to Friday, in your target language. And that's a minimum, you guys, like a minimum. For me, for my French, I shoot for 90 minutes Monday to Friday. And for my Spanish, I shoot for 90 minutes or more every day. Ain't no Monday to Friday, like ain't no days off with my Spanish. My Spanish is every single day. And on top of that, I only watch TV in Spanish, which is a sacrifice. Like, of course, I want to watch Watchmen and I want to watch all the stuff that you guys are like watching and telling me about. But if it ain't dubbed in Spanish or French, like, yo no veo. The TV watching thing, though, I do feel like has been really helpful for me. And I think that it just goes to show priorities. Like, what is your priority? And if learning another language is your priority, you have to be serious about it. You have to be consistent with it. And you have to understand that it's not going to happen to you overnight. It's like, for the longest time when I could just read Spanish, I felt like, okay, I can read. So eventually, like through magical osmosis or something, like I'm gonna start speaking. And it never happened that way. It wasn't until I was like, you know what? I'm in this town, I'm in Vegas, everybody speaks Spanish. I have so many opportunities to engage people and to practice. Let me seek this out and make this my reality. Seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened. All right, let's do this last little segment. Okay, so you are no longer afraid. You are ready to speak your new language. You've learned some basics, whether that was from some software, Duolingo, an app, or just picking up a grammar book. But you want to know how, because you maybe live in a region or part of the world where you don't have access to native speakers in your target language. So what do you do? How do you go from beginner to intermediate and then from intermediate to ultimately advanced? So the first strategy, which is kind of going to refute a lot of what I said about classroom learning before, but I need y'all to understand that I don't have a problem with classroom learning. I actually think that classroom learning for languages is extremely effective. It's just that the way we do it for children in schools is not structured properly. So despite the shortcomings of our educational system, I still recommend classes and private tutoring as an excellent way, especially for you to move from beginner to intermediate, or even more so intermediate to advanced. The reason why I still like traditional teaching for that intermediate to advanced level is because you need to have somebody in your life who's going to correct you, corregir. As an American, a lot of people, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, they're not going to correct you. I don't know if it's because people just feel like they shouldn't correct Americans, or a lot of times I think it could be that they are learning English themselves, and so they want to take advantage of the opportunity to learn English with you. And so the priority may switch from speaking to you in the target language that you're working on to just responding to you in English, because that's the way for them to practice as well. And so if you really want to learn this language and master it, you've got to find people, you've got to find professionals. Ideally, I say professionals who are going to correct you while you're speaking, so that you can improve your speaking, you can improve your vocabulary, and you don't go about saying things incorrectly and not knowing. Because most people who you encounter, once they figure out that you're American, if they don't correct you, they're just gonna be like, and I mean, trust me, like we all do it. Little secret. They even do it to each other half the fucking time. They don't even understand each other, which is crazy. Various accents, being from different regions, speaking different dialects. A lot of Spanish speakers don't even understand each other. So it's really important for you to have a professional source or somebody who you can trust to put that time in for you and to correct you. And because online tutoring with the internet now is so accessible and so affordable, there's tons of sites and tons of tutors that you can access. I swear this is not sponsored or an ad in any way. I like using the Preply site. There's thousands of tutors on Preply. I even teach people English sometimes on Preply. It's literally a site where you can connect with people in all these different languages and find people who you can afford and who can actually correct you. And I try to meet with somebody like that 2 or 3 times a week in Spanish, to be honest, to be corrected, because like I said, in the real world, people are not going to correct me. And so I need to better myself by putting myself in front of someone who has the experience and the ability to correct me while I'm speaking. I definitely want to take a French class as well. There aren't as many opportunities for French classes here in Vegas because French is not a huge like Vegas vibe, but there is a couple of schools that I found, Lisson, I believe is Lisson, that I found that I plan on pursuing. So community college, local colleges, those are another great resource. If there's a community college in your neighborhood, you can totally check them out. A lot of times they have really affordable language classes. There's thousands of grammar books that you can order online. You can read the reviews, see what other people think. A lot of them even come with audio material for you to improve. So it's important, I want to stress, studying the grammar of your language. A lot of people don't want to work on grammar. And I know that grammar, even in your native language, even in English, is really frustrating. But understanding grammar is how you can understand how the language works. And because I understand Spanish grammar so well from taking it in a classroom, French grammar is a lot easier for me to understand because it is similar. And so I'm able to pull some of the similarities from Spanish into my French, which helps me a lot with, it makes me I'm more proficient faster because I have the Spanish background. All polyglots do that, by the way. They all pull similarities from other languages they speak to draw connections to help them to learn their new language faster. Back to watching TV, that's my second tip for getting fluent hella fast. You want to watch TV in your target language. You want to listen to podcasts in your target language. You want to read newspapers, read books, read articles in your target language. You really want to immerse yourself in your target language as much as possible. For me, with watching TV in Spanish, I immediately saw an improvement in my speaking. So I would watch Spanish, and I still do this. I shouldn't say would. I watch TV in Spanish with Spanish speakers speaking, and then with the subtitles in Spanish on the bottom of the screen. So basically, I'm listening and reading in Spanish at the same time. Doing that, I saw an immediate improvement. I went from not speaking, responding to people in Spanish, responding to people in English, and literally within 30 days, I was comfortable responding to people in Spanish. Even if I didn't know what the hell I was saying, I was comfortable saying, you know what, me equivocó, yo no sé, discúlpame, ayúdame, por favor. I was just comfortable and confident because I'm listening to it and I'm being exposed to the language and I'm hearing it through this immersive experience constantly. And because we have the ability to stream now, you guys, it's really just no excuse. You can turn anything pretty much into your target language. I got started with it by watching shows that I already was familiar with, that I already enjoy in Spanish. So for example, that 70s show, I watched that in its entirety in Spanish with the subtitles, the dubbing. Stranger Things, same thing. I listened to the dub version and I had the Spanish words running at the bottom at the same time I was listening to Stranger Things in Spanish. And then once I felt you know what, I've mastered these dubbed versions of content, then I moved on to content that's produced for Spanish speakers by Spanish speakers. So Telemundo programs, things like that. Univision, like watching content that's made in Spanish, hecho de español, por español, to help me basically bridge that gap between that barrier, because Spanish speakers speak very fast. Spanish is actually the second fastest spoken language in the world. And so it can definitely be daunting, but you just kind of have to start wherever you are. Like, obviously, I used the Spanish subtitles because I already knew how to read Spanish, which is why I highly recommend learning to read in your target language first and really making that a priority so that you can then consume content in multiple forms, because you have that. It's kind of, I hate to say it's a handicap, because like, so for example, when I finish watching Celia, I'm transitioning to no more subtitles, which means I have to only rely on my listening. But it's almost like I kind of training wheeled myself up enough to be able to now progress onto that next level. And that's exactly what you're going to want to do. If you can't read in your target language, that's okay. I would suggest you just watch TV shows or read books for children. Like, when we learned English, we started off remember, we would read it like a second grade level, then you were reading at a fourth grade level. Like, you want to treat it the same way with your other language. You want to basically say, you know what, like, I'm going to treat myself like I'm a kid. And there's so many like kids programs and kids shows that you can watch that will really help you, because it's literally there to help kids learn how to talk. It'll help you learn how to talk as well. My last tip, it's not really a tip on how to become fluent. I think I've kind of stressed classes and apps and TV and talking to people, talking to strangers, and getting out of your comfort zone. But this last tip, I think, is really more just about choosing a language that's best suited for you. So most people, and most Americans in particular, choose Spanish and French, like me, as their second and their third languages. They're the most commonly taught languages in our país. 95% of classes that are offered in America in another language are offered in either Spanish or French, and they are Romance languages. And the reason why you might meet a lot of polyglots or people who speak a lot of Romance languages, so they speak Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, is because they're very similar. So once you, like I said, once I had a good foundation of Spanish, I found that French wasn't as difficult as it would have been if I was starting from scratch. So that's why a lot of us tend to stick with our Romance languages, just because we can pick up more languages faster, or we can have conversations with people. Like, for example, I can have a conversation with someone who speaks Italian because it's so similar that, like, I can kind of like change it's weird, but I can kind of like adapt a little bit to them, and they can adapt a little bit to me. And so we kind of end up speaking like this weird blend of like Spanglo Italian. I don't know. It's weird. I would make the same argument about English. You know, like, a lot of my friends who are Hispanic or Latino who live here in the United States, I always think they speak an Americanized version of Spanish. So like, they tell me all the time, like, when they go home to Mexico or they go home to Puerto Rico, they kind of have a little bit of catching up to do as well with their family members, because they're speaking almost like a Spanglish. You know, we kind of mix certain words, you know, iPhone, Chipotle, we're mixing them into our vernacular. And so it creates a blended language. So if you've tried, you know, to learn Spanish, you've tried to learn French, and it just didn't resonate with you, try something else. There are literally 7,000 languages currently being spoken on this planet, and some are spoken way more than people speak Romance languages, to be honest. Like, you could learn Chinese, which is the most popular language in the world. 1.3 billion people speak Mandarin. 1.3 billion people speak Mandarin. That's a lot of people that you can talk to if you're not trying to learn a Romance language. You can do Bengali. Bengali is 193 million. You could do Hindi, which is 379 million. You can learn Arabic. 314 million people speak Arabic in multitude of forms. There's like Tunisian Arabic, Moroccan Arabic. You can learn Russian. 154 million people speak Russian. Japanese. 128 million people speak Japanese. Like, I have a lot of friends actually that speak Japanese, and they went that route because they decided, like, you know what? I don't really like this Romance language. Doesn't resonate with me. I like Japanese culture. That's what I want to learn. And so they learned it, and they speak fluent Japanese. And it's incredible. Honestly, like, even for myself, I probably will go a non-romance language route at some point in my personal development. It won't be anytime soon. I think I have probably, realistically, I probably have another 5 years of working on my Spanish before I'm like super avanzada. Um, and I would say probably to get to that level in French, I'm looking at 10 years from now. So probably 10 years from now, I'll start learning a non-romance language, like probably Mandarin. Conversational Mandarin, I think would be a really great thing to have, especially for me working in like the business realm. But I just want you guys to know that like it's literally never too late to learn a language. It's never too late to challenge yourself, and you don't have to do anything that other people do. Like you can learn whatever you want. There's literally, I was looking up languages for this episode. There was languages that I've never even freaking heard of before that you guys can learn. So don't let America limit you. Don't let the American educational system limit you. Don't let your own fears limit you. Don't let this idea that you're too old or that Americans don't speak other languages. Like, don't let anything stop you. Like, you can learn anything that you want to learn if you put your mind to it. So thank you so much for listening, you guys. Muchísimas gracias. Merci beaucoup. Espero que este episodio te ayuda mucho y espero que tú logras tu meta de hablar con personas que hablan lenguas diferentes en todas partes, en todos lados, en el mundo eterno, o eterno, sí, yo no sé, sí, hay palabras que yo no sé, es normal, en el mundo total. Dale. If you have some tips or some tricks to share with me or my listeners about language learning, go ahead and leave me a comment down below, or you guys can send me an email. My email is desertgardenpodcast@gmail.com. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. I drop bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, bi-weekly episodes because like I'm really busy. I'm sorry. But yes, I will see you guys in 2 weeks with another topic, and good luck with your language learning. Hasta luego. En bientôt. Adios. Ciao, ciao. Bye, bye. Thank you.